Sri Lanka is an island nation, blessed with a remarkable and amazing diversity of flora and fauna. Ecological, climatic, soil and topographical variability across the country provides favorable conditions for many types of species of flora and fauna. It is vital to study and disseminate information on biological diversity to formulate development plans and programs that are both successful and sustainable. It is also mandatory to protect biodiversity for the survival of life on Earth. The Botanic Gardens and Herbaria have evolved to become important scientific institutions and are key players in plant conservation and the education of the public, while the Botanic Gardens attract people worldwide for their aesthetic beauty. This information gathered and disseminated only through systematic efforts will strengthen the entire process of conservation and sustainable use. Department of National Botanic Gardens is a leading government institution in the field of botany in Sri Lanka, which provides technical, scientific information and expertise on plant resources in natural and man-made environments, mainly for conservation and sustainable use. Botanic Gardens and Herbaria have traditionally been the academic centers for the study of plant life. Over 3 centuries, world recognition of extraordinary rich diversity of plants in Sri Lanka is well based on past history of the National Herbarium and scientific studies of botanists attached to these botanic gardens, which has an attribution to the country's popularity as the Pearl of the Indian Ocean. History of plant collections in Sri Lanka spans over 3 centuries, with initial stages aimed at studying plants utilized for medicinal practices, spices and food. Flora Zelanica in 1747 and Species Plantarum in 1753, written by a great taxonomist, Carolus Linnaeus. Included with the original botanical collection of Paul Herman, who made plant collections in Sri Lanka from 1672 to 1677, can be considered as major landmarks of botanical history of Sri Lanka. Exploration of plants tuned into more intensive and more scientific way when Royal Botanic Gardens Peradeniya 1821 and National Herbarium 1824 were established. The herbarium is a 19th century creation established in 1824 for studies on identification of plants, teaching and research. The honor of establishing the National Herbarium is due to Mr. Alexander Moon, the first superintendent of the Royal Botanic Gardens at Peradeniya. This is a key government institution which is responsible to certify valid scientific name of a plant for various applications.
The National Herbarium of Sri Lanka is a source for biodiversity information on plants, and it also a resource for scientific identification of plants of the world. And the national collections include plant specimens maintained under international standards and several historical books. These historical books represent masterpieces of work of several eminent botanists worldwide who worked over 3 centuries, dated back to 18th century.
Herbarium is a collection of pressed and dried plant specimens mounted on sheets and stored in cupboards in a systematic sequence. Eminent botanists from all parts of the world who worked on Sri Lankan flora in the 19th, 20th and 21st centuries have contributed to the present collections. These historical plant collections hold a wealth of scientific information of plant life for nearly 200 years, making it a national and global resource for understanding the past and present for a better future.
The National Herbarium is the only institution in Sri Lanka that has the authority to authenticate, verify and name plants for legal purposes in a court of law, as well as for scientific and commercial purposes. Authentication is a regular activity that is done by the herbarium for scientific research, for commercial purposes, as well as for legal court cases.
The National Herbarium Peradeniya is a key government institution responsible for authentication of plant species for fundamental and applied purposes. It also provides services to the judicial system in accurate identification of illegally collected plants and different plant parts, flowers, seeds, wood, etc. For samples with leaves, fruits and/or flowers, identification is based on the morphological characters. Specimens are identified by comparing with herbarium specimens and literature references. Submitted wood specimens are identified according to wood anatomical characters. Microscopic wood anatomical characters of the submitted samples were compared with the reference collection of slides to identify the specimens. Due to the high demand, natural forest products are often illegally collected. Therefore, regularly received confiscated consignments of smuggled plants submitted by courts and police stations. A majority of submitted wood samples are vallapatta and sandalwood. Orchids, medicinal plants, and ferns are also received.
Authentication is important since we have to know the identity of a plant before we use it for certain human as well as animal consumptions, or for cosmetic purposes, or for medicinal value. And this authentication is or can be done only by the National Herbarium.
Holding the main national plant repository of over 170,000 specimens, including with over 400 valuable type specimens. Those are arranged systematically in cupboards according to standard nomenclatural rules. Moreover, historical botanical illustrations of eminent botanical artists, botanical literature, spirit collections of bulky plant parts are vital collections available. Herbarium access is only for plant identification and other relevant services and is permitted only by appointment. National Herbarium is continuously carrying out plant expeditions and botanical research to update information on the country's floral wealth. Botanical surveys are often undertaken to determine the diversity and distribution of plant species and quality of habitats within a given area. National Botanical Survey is a main project activity conducted by the National Herbarium in collaboration with other main gardens in the department. Preparations are carefully attended by herbarium staff before the field visits for the collection of samples. Internationally accepted standard herbarium techniques are adopted during the process of the preparation of herbarium specimens. Plant materials are mainly collected as dry specimens, wet collections, and DNA leaf material. Further, data captured through field notebooks, photographs, name tags, and so on. Pressing in the field for drying. And adding preservatives such as alcoholic solutions are important aspects to consider. Different forms of plant diversity. Algae, lichens, mosses, and liverworts, and also ferns are exploited and studied. Drying specimens with post-preparations in the dryer unit. Identification, mounting and labeling. Such actions are essential steps before depositing specimens in the cupboards. Nearly 200 years of history of the herbarium, several historical and landmark books were published on Sri Lankan flora to provide first-hand information on the country's floristic diversity. An updated list of threatened plant diversity is published in National Red Data Book. Conservation assessments are conducted according to international guidelines of International Union of Conservation of Nature. All the information and distribution data collected, then analyzed and mapped with expert comments and reviews.
The role of the herbarium is not only authentication, but it is also involved in education and training of local individuals, scientists, school students, university students, all those who are involved or who would like to learn about plants are trained in the National Herbarium.
According to the last update in the National Red Data Book 2012, 3,154 of native flowering plant species are recorded with 894 endemics. Of this diversity, 1,569 taxa, that is nearly 50% of total flowering plant species, are threatened, including 5 extinct, 2 extinct in wild, 177 critically endangered and possibly extinct, 218 critically endangered, 552 endangered, 615 vulnerable. These data were directly applied in conservation practices and development plans. Our botanical survey studies since 2012 have made significant findings, including rediscovery of 2 extinct species and further records and collections on 6 critically endangered and possibly extinct, 29 critically endangered, 189 endangered, and 259 vulnerable. Species and taxa. In future, we will focus on extension of the botanical survey to cover more ecosystems of the country, availability of survey data in sophisticated and integrated systems for wide applications and utilization, introduce robust plant identification systems through DNA technology, facilitate enrichment of the ex situ collection of the botanic gardens in Sri Lanka, expansion of the national repository in the National Herbarium, maintain fully documented data collections under internationally reputed database system, PGBase. All of these efforts to provide first-hand information on plant diversity locally and internationally to apply in conservation practices as well as in sustainable use of plant resources. The National Herbarium will continue to provide constant and permanent records on country's plant diversity, and its role is increasingly important in the face of global climatic changes and present and future challenges for existence of life on Earth.